Good morning, everyone. It's 7 a.m., May 15th, and I'll call this meeting of the Fergus Falls City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Roll call, please.
Here.
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 Yeah. Here.
Here.
Here. We have a quorum. First item on the agenda is a update from Center for the Arts, and I'll call on the director, Michael Bergrath. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me at this ungodly hour to come and speak to all of you. I really do appreciate it. The city gives us money, a little bit of money every year, and so it's important for us to come over to you and let you know once a year and educate you a little bit about a Center for the Arts. So I have a little presentation. I was told I have 5 minutes, but because I'm from the arts, it's going to be closer to 8. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado.
You were from finance, it'd be about 30.
I deserve that.
There's some financial things in there. If you have questions, don't be afraid to ask.
Oh, I know. Like I said, it's well deserved.
Center for the Arts is getting ready to celebrate its 100th year in the downtown location. It was built in 1921. We're approaching 2021. It's one of the few organizations that has always had its same mission downtown. And we're very excited about that. But it is a 100-year-old building. Our mission is to connect artists and audiences by providing the best possible arts experience that inspire creativity, curiosity, imagination, and learning. We have fiddled around with this a number of times, but keep coming back to it and believe that it is truly a good mission for a Center for the Arts. By the numbers, Center for the Arts currently has 2 full-time employees. We average a little over 70 shows a year. Our annual budget is $450,000. We bring in about $60,000 in sponsorships from the community annually and about $55,000 in grant monies, although those grant monies can be pulled out from underneath us at any time, just like our Mulan. In your packets, I gave you the definitions, so you can look at this later. You all have this. The Arts and Economic Prosperity 5 calculator, which is on the internet and has been put together by business people, shows us that for a town of less than 50,000, with our expenses and our total attendance for last year's season, that a Center for the Arts generates nearly $1 million in revenue to Fergus Falls. And you can go online and get more details on this if you want to. Arts people have always been kind of fun. They've gone around to business folk, excuse me, when they're looking for money and said, you know, we make a difference. We make an economic difference. We really do. And the business people would look back and say, show me. And we go, no, but we really do. And so a handful of years ago, the Minnesota Citizens for the Arts and Creative Minnesota got together and started to compile information. So when we went to people, we could say, yes, here are the facts and the figures. And so the very first study that came out in 2015, Fergus Falls was a part of. And in that study, it says the size of the nonprofit arts and culture economy in most cities roughly aligned with the size of the population. However, several cities, Grand Rapids, Cook County, and Fergus Falls in particular, had dramatically higher attendance and economic impact than expected. Here are the results of those 17 cities that were done that first year. You can see we ranked 13th, but total economic impact, we were 9th, we were 11th in attendance, and 7th in economic impact per capita. With that study, a Center for the Arts was a part of that, and we had, in Fergus Falls, there were 42,000, just over 42,000 people that attended events that participated in this. Of those 42, 25,000 of them came to a Center for the Arts for programming. This is the most recent study that was done. It just came out about a month ago, actually. And Otter Tail County was a part of this particular study. And again, we ranked number 5th with the counties and the cities that were up there. And again, if you go over to the total attendees, with 100,000 people attending events in Otter Tail County, again, nearly a quarter of that were people coming to a Center for the Arts. Every year we have an audit done, and I brought some of the audit information to you. We go back over a decade at this point in time. We are a $450,000 business. And with that, if you go down to the change in net assets, you can see 2 years ago, 2017, we had a $3,000 profit. And last year, we had a $1,300 deficit with over $450,000 in our budget and nearly $20,000 added by the board without any financial backing for it. I think we do a pretty good job as a business downtown. This is some detail for you. Again, this is in your packets. We have a new ticketing system, and we're always interested, now that we can track it, to see where people are coming from. And we were surprised. When I first came to town, I thought Fergus Falls supported Fergus Falls, and we really weren't a regional or getting out any farther than our county or the close counties to us. Well, in 2017 and 18, we had people purchase tickets from 9 different counties in North Dakota. Now, that may be 2 people, but at least they purchased tickets and came over. And then we went, well, what about Minnesota? In 2017-18, and our fiscal year runs July to June, there were 35 different counties that supported a Center for the Arts by purchasing tickets. In 2018-19, there were 34 counties. Yesterday, we were doing some discussions, and somebody said, well, this must be people who come up in the summertime, go to the lakes, and then come over and buy tickets. And our answer is no, it's not. In the summertime, we do our children's theater and our summer theater, and those tickets are almost bought exclusively by citizens in our area. So these are people who are coming throughout the year to a Center for the Arts. And we said, and purchasing tickets. This does not include all the free shows. So we said, what about the nation? And in 2017, 20 different states, people from different states, purchased tickets at a Center for the Arts. 17 last year. And so we really are a facility that brings people in from around the country, certainly around our state and the surrounding communities. Concerts in the park and on Lincoln. We've been averaging about 2,000 people for the 11-ish shows that we do in the parks in the summertime. Huge thank you to Park and Rec. It is always clean, it is always beautiful, it is always set up, and we cannot thank them enough for what they do for us when we are doing these concerts. The average cost of the acts that we bring in for these free concerts is about $5,000. This year we're upping it to nearly $12,000 because we're doing more concerts on Lincoln Avenue. The average donation as we pass the hat is about 65 cents a person, which isn't enough to cover it, so without sponsorship support, we couldn't do these concerts in the park. It takes about 100 hours of staff time to put these on, and we have a great time doing it and believe that it's really important to the citizens in our community to continue this. One day we should all sit down and tell stories. Our summer theater has been a staple for our community for quite some time. It averages about 60 people every summer, which includes the orchestra, and I thought I'd throw in the picture in the upper right-hand side so you can see how we cram the orchestra in back of the theater. If you open up the door right behind them, that's the alley. The average cost is about $30,000, and with ticket sales, if we sell out virtually every performance, it makes about $30,000. So it is a break-even at best for us. But it involves community, it involves community people seeing the performance, and again, it's something we believe in. Children's theater is something we started a couple of years ago when one of the actors said, can we ever do a show without kids in it, something in the summertime? And I said, yes, let's start a children's theater company. And the first year we had about 60 kids, then it was 80, 120. The last 3 years we've been over 200 kids. And we are anticipating doing that again. The average cost to produce that is $12,000 in royalties and fees. We bring in about $30,000, making the children's theater our largest revenue generating piece that a Center for the Arts does. The cost is going up this year as we are adding a third director. If you ever want to see the difference a director makes, come and see the children's shows, because it is the same set, it is the same script, it is the same music, and they are 3 completely different shows. Outreach programming. When we bring the artists into the community, it's important for us to get out into the community to say thank you. Our outreach programs, we perform to about 5,000 plus people annually. Most of those are students. When we bring Tony DeBlois in and we go over to Kennedy School and they pack Kennedy, the numbers pop up very fast for those people that are participating in those outreach programs. But we get to the VA. We get over to the assisted living homes. We go outside of Fergus Falls to West Central, to Underwood, to those other places where they may not be getting as much as we do here. I'm going to go back just a second, too, to the Children's Theater. It's not just the summer Children's Theater, but it's been so popular that we're also doing a winter theater now. About 30 kids have been trying out for that. And those are the kids who aren't participating in anything else. And there's new faces and new looks, and we enjoy that very much. We also bring in professional theater from across the country. One of our favorites to work with is TheaterWorks USA, who is a professional actors equity company that comes out of New York, and they travel the country. And we bring students over to us. And so we like to get the youth involved. The outreach programming, how many kids in their community can say that they opened up for the Glenn Miller Orchestra? We love the outreach programming. Community programming. Just because it's done at a Center for the Arts doesn't mean it's our show. And that's one that we really want people to hear. We rent out our facility, and quite a bit. We had Medora here last Christmas. That was a rental. They called us and said, can we use your facility? Run Like Hell, the Pink Floyd experience, that was a rental for us. We bring in community orchestras. We bring in orchestras from and bands from Morris, from Moorhead, from Fargo. They call up and say, can we use your facility? We've also had the school board candidates debates and other things happen at a Center for the Arts. The Center Series is a little bit of our bread and butter. We bring in between, averaging about 8 shows, somewhere 7, 9, 8. We bring in diverse offerings from all over the world. We hope that when people buy the season, that they are picking it because of 2 or 3 things they like, but fall in love with those little gooey things that are stuck between the 2 cookies on the outside. We now have an average of 250 people buying season tickets. We are the envy of all of my colleagues. The next closest is about 60. And so we are very happy that we have 250 people in our surrounding area and community who commit to the entire season package. We've also now put in a pick 4 option for those folk who are going away over the winter time or just don't want to make all of them. We will always have individual show tickets. So even if we do a bang-up year where people are buying season tickets, we will hold back 80 tickets at the very least for people who are coming into town that day or citizens who just want to see that show. Average talent for those 8 shows in purchasing the acts is about $60,000. By the time you throw in the back line, the food, the hotels, motels, and all of that, it's over $100,000 just for those 8 shows. Capital improvements over the last 8 years. We're very proud of what we do, and we try to do it as much as we can ourselves. We want to thank the city for its continued help in making some of these projects happen. We put in new theater seatings and theater seating. While the seats were out, we painted our facility. The Bakken building, which is above the senior center, on the left-hand side, the 2 pictures there, you can see what the construction started like and how it finished up with the dance studio upstairs. This is a city building. And we've converted it over to something that wasn't being used to something that's alive. You can watch the dancers there at night with the lights on. You can see the people doing art up there, and it is a great piece for us. It is a break-even adventure, but it's better than what we were doing. Roosevelt Park Power. When I first came here, there are 2 15-amp plugs in that band shelter. And the caterer would plug into one. We'd tell him which one because it was the one that tripped all the time. And we'd use the other one, and most of the time the power would trip on that. So we asked the city if we could put more power in. The city said yes, as long as we pay for it. So we did. They did all the work. They put it in, and I'm sure they did extra things, but we paid for the power, and we are so thankful, so grateful for that. We put in a new box office. That darn little lower left-hand side metal piece that sits on top of our roof that we're still paying for $140,000 worth of heating and air conditioning for the box office and the offices upstairs. We own our building. We are very unique in this state. It is not part of a school district, a municipality, or a private company. We own our building, and therefore all the repairs are on us. We've moved our lighting and soundboard from upstairs to downstairs and put in a president's box for special guests upstairs or patrons who aren't afraid to pay a little bit more to have the best seat in the house. And then down on the lower right-hand side, our curb cut. We called the city and asked if we could put in a curb cut. We were told that you had plenty on that block and that we could as long as we paid for it. And so we raised the money and said, yes, we'd like to do this. The city gave us names of folk to put out for bid. We had one, and then they went belly up. We searched for almost 2 years looking for somebody to put this in. And we were told that it was too small of a project for any of the contractors to do. So the city stepped in and said, let us help. And within a month and a half, 2 months, the project was done. We paid for it, but the city helped us make sure that we had somebody there to do it. In that time, the project doubled in price. At a Center for the Arts, we make a difference. It's not just about the money, although it has to be. There's a great commercial that I grew up with as a kid. It was a dental commercial about your teeth and cleaning them and making sure that they were in great shape. And the tagline at the end said, your teeth, just ignore them and they'll go away. And we don't want to be ignored. We don't want to go away. We believe that we are an important part of downtown. We are a business. We are glad to be a business. We are glad to do what we can. And finally, I want this group, this is kind of a little offshoot from this presentation. I'm going to get in a lot of trouble right now, but I believe as we continue to do these downtown projects and the Center for the Arts calls the city to have these closed off, I believe we're probably about the only group that pays the city the fees to put the barricades up, to have people bring things over, to do the overtime. It costs the city money. You pay these people to bring all this stuff out. It's a service that you are providing, and we believe we should pay for that service. If we don't, I am afraid we are going to lose the little bit that we are getting from the city because that money has to come from somewhere. So ladies and gentlemen, we are doing 2 to 3 concerts in the park that are, on Lincoln, just for the center this year. You will not see me standing up in front of you asking for a waiver for those. We are only too happy to work with Guy and the crew and pay for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
And you're a little over 8 minutes.
It was the introduction.
Might get over Bill's time.
Next up is a discussion on the Otter Tail Power licensing of hydro dams, and I'll turn over to City Administrator Andrew Bremsen.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members, good morning. I am working with half a voice this morning, so I'm going to keep it relatively short. And I will say that an artist's 8 minutes is a lot different than an administrator's 8 minutes. So I'm literally going to talk for 60 seconds. But I want to say this morning, thank you to members of the Minnesota DNR and Otter Tail Power Company for joining us on fairly short notice. I just reached out to them either the end of last week or beginning of this week, and appreciate the fact that they were able to make it work and be here early with us this morning. This topic arose at our council meeting last week regarding the relicensing of the hydro dams. And at that time, I briefly mentioned that this is related to the FERC relicensing process, which is a 5-year relicensing process. We're about 3 years into that process, if not more. I've been here for that period of time, and I think it's been going on since the day I started. So knowing that that's a federal process and dictated by a federal commission, so to speak, I think it would be a little inappropriate for the city to derail that process or to do anything more than and just have a conversation at a high level that may be educational for us rather than a decision-making meeting that would derail or change or alter or get in the way of the process that's been laid out, that's been ongoing. Like I mentioned the other day, we have been involved as a city staff in these meetings. We've had some meetings with Otter Tail Power specifically. We've attended as many of the public meetings as we possibly could and have stayed relatively in the loop as to what's happening with the process. And I feel like it's been a transparent process, maybe confusing, but certainly transparent. And so I don't see this conversation today as anything more than maybe educational. And then if the city council has just conversations that they want to have further down the road or questions that Otter Tail Power or the DNR could potentially answer if there's still confusion, I think that might be helpful. But I certainly think it would be out of line for us as a city to derail a process that's been ongoing for, like I said, at least 3 years, and that's defined by the federal government. And is a process that's followed in many other areas across the United States. So, Your Honor, members, I would say it probably would be most prudent to ask somebody from Otter Tail Power to begin by just talking about what the process is and giving us a high-level education. We have we have time, so I don't mean to rush the conversation or anything like that. We don't have more than 8 minutes, but if we could start there, and maybe that'll generate some additional questions, and certainly give the DNR the opportunity to talk about their interest in this process and how they're viewing the process as well. I think that'd be appropriate.
Thanks, Andrew. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning. Yeah, my name is Bill Swanson. I'm Manager of Supply Engineering and Operations for Untitled Power Company. Here to talk to you about the relicensing process. I did view the council meeting from last week, saw Councilman Kwame's comments from last week, so I'm here to address those, as well as some of the questions that came up in the recent public meeting. And to start with that, with that, and I appreciate that, Mr. Bremseth, for going through that. I'll walk through the process, if that's okay, before I address those. And sort of one overarching thing that I'll talk about here, and an individual at Untitled Power Company, Mr. Bruce Gerritsen, very key about what are the key takeaways from anybody's talk, right? So let me just say, before I go through this, the key takeaway is, if you have any desire to be involved with the process, if you want to make any comments in the process, please do so. It's a very, as Mr. Bremseth says, it's a very transparent process. Anyone can put comments in the FERC process. You can do it electronically. You can write them letters. They'll put it into there. FERC reads everyone's comments, and everyone has voice here. So if you have that desire, please do that. And I'm going to say there's some facts here, and then maybe some of my opinions as well. And I'll clearly state when they're facts and when they're opinions. And so you can go through it and see that. But so here's where we're at. And I did put out 2 handouts here. There's a single sheet that really references Otter Tail's specific process, where they're at, as well as a booklet on how to get involved with the hydro relicensing project if you're interested. And I'll start there on page 7. So there's different types of relicensing processes. We're in the integrated relicensing process. And we're coming up to really a key milestone in the process on page 7. We are just about ready to file the draft application. So really, we've been at this for 2 to 3 years now. And how that starts is, about 3 years ago, we put in an initial application, what our proposed plan was. And to really paraphrase, sum up, our proposed plan is to leave the hydros basically as they are, with minimal to no changes in the operation. So just from a high level, that is really the initial proposal. Then there is a meeting that takes place, and this is so that we're following the FERC process, and FERC comes here and listens to suggested studies that are meant to inform FERC, meant to inform any stakeholders about the hydros, what's happening with the hydros, any specific information. All these studies are public, and anyone can take a look at that. So there's a scoping meeting about the studies, what needs to take place. That was about 2 years ago. And there were 11 studies that were offered up and completed. I can read through the 11 studies, but in the sake of time, I'll group them into 3 different types of studies. There's sort of fish and wildlife studies. There's historical studies, architectural, archaeological studies, and then there are recreational studies with an addendum. So there are 3 different types of categories of studies. We can walk through those studies, and I brought individuals here if anybody wants to get into the details of those studies. So we embarked on those studies, and after the first year studies, we've heard, we had another public meeting to go over those results, hear comments from anyone, anyone who's read them, anybody who's concerned about the process, anything like that. I had that meeting out here at Fergus Falls, embarked in the second year of studies, completed those studies, just issued them here in the last couple of months, and then a couple of weeks ago we had our 3rd public meeting where we went over those second year studies. And so I think some of the discussion it's had about those are the meetings that have taken place here. There's been a couple of other just informational meetings, but those are the 3 FERC-related meetings that we've had. And so now we've had these meetings, and we've heard the input. I think as of today, or maybe it was yesterday, we have to file the summary of those meetings. We have that one, I believe, filed or to be filed shortly, and now we'll be preparing the draft license. So it's really a key, draft proposed license. It's really a key milestone for us, and our intention is to file that around July 3rd. So if you want to spend your July 4th weekend reading our license, you're certainly welcome to do that. But there's 3 areas, 3 timelines when people might want to, put their comments in. Certainly, when we put the meeting summary together, we're just about ready to complete that. You could put the comments in at that point. And you could put in the comments after the draft application is complete. So once we do that on July 3rd, from July 3rd to about the 1st of October, there's a period of time where there'll be comments coming in on that. And then after FERC produces its environmental assessment, which so it's on the FERC timeline, when they have it done, we project that to be about the end of 2020. We don't know, we don't have a specific date around that. And so, just if I was to characterize the comments that we've heard at some of these meetings, generally I'd say that there are people that just want to be informed. What's going on, what's happening, the river's important to us, they want to know, so they want to be engaged, they just want to hear the information. I'd say that there's been a lot of comments or criticisms on the technical basis of the studies. There's thousands of pages of studies, thousands of points of data, a lot of information in there, and so there's been a lot of, questions about specific things that are put in the studies, and that's fine. And then I'd say that there's, comments from concerned citizens about the river itself, just wanting to maintain a healthy river. And then I'd say there's a fairly large group of citizens out there who are concerned about the potential for the hydros to go away. So there's a lot of comments that we get from individuals, homeowners, that see the relicensing process as a potential threat to the hydros going away. And so there's been a large vocal group of folks making these comments at these meetings. And so, sometimes this is characterized as otter tail, is somehow in conflict with the DNR or something like that. And I really hope that that's not the case. We're producing very technical studies, and we know there are caring professional individuals here in this community that, really care about the river and, are weighing in on comments like that. It really is not the case. And so, because this open, transparent process is here, we understand that people are going to have these type of comments. So, kind of moving into the factual stage, and now you're going to get more of my opinion stage today. So going back to that, and thank you, Councilman Kwame, for bringing this up so we could clarify that. What was discussed is a sort of a pot of money, and to be clear, there is no pot of money from Otter Tail Power Company for these types of projects. FERC, what will happen as a result of these studies, FERC will put conditions on the license that the licensee has to abide by in order to have these hydros in place. So whatever these conditions are, Otter Tail will need to follow them if they're going to maintain the license of the hydros. Typically, these types of conditions have been, canoe portage related. So it's kind of impact based. Again, my opinion is impact based. What are these hydros causing an impact that people who want to use or enjoy the river, that they could be impacting? So if you want to canoe down the river and you come to the hydro, I think part of the 1991 relicensing process is, well, is there a reasonable way to, for example, supply a portage around the dam so that, so that there's potentially a study done, how difficult is it to make a portage? Typically those kind of things aren't difficult, so then there's signage in areas reserved for people to come in and out of the river, something like that. My opinion is that FERC is not likely to say that the hydro in Fergus Falls is causing the need for an amphitheater in Fergus Falls, or that the hydro in Fergus Falls is causing the need to move a pipe over the river in Fergus Falls. Again, my opinion, please take it for that. It's FERC's opinion that really matters in this case, not mine. So just you kind of hearing my thoughts about, how the process could play out. Additionally, what was mentioned was fish passage around Pisgah Dam down through the area around the old water treatment plant. So fish passage is something that's been brought up significantly. There is a study on there about fish passage at all the hydros and what that could potentially be, what it would look like, very high level cost information. The fish passage around Pisgah Dam was estimated to be in the neighborhood of $1.5 to $2.5 million. So that's just Pisgah Dam. If you're going to have fish passage, if that's the case, it wouldn't really potentially make sense to have it at just one dam. You'd probably need it at all the dams. So all the dams together were between $9 and $10 million. That, any type of investment that Otter Tail is required to make, it's really not Otter Tail. It's the ratepayers, the electrical customers of Otter Tail Power Company that are going to be making these investments. So that's not an anticipation. That Otter Tail is not making an anticipation that they're going to make that kind of investment at the hydros. So, lastly, just I'll wrap it up, and maybe some more comments are open to questions. We know that there's been some criticism. We don't take it personally. Imagine if Otter Tail goes out and hires an engineering firm to produce a report of an area of your particular expertise. It's likely you're going to have a different opinion about that. We understand that. It really is very open and informative. To allow everyone to sort of hear what the hydros are about, how they're being operated, what changes need to be made, if any. And I guess with that, if there's any questions, maybe I'll yield the floor.
Sure. Thank you, Bill. Any questions from the council for Bill before we open it up to any other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you, Bill. Anyone else in the audience have any questions, comments? All right. I think. Eric, did you want to?
Sure. Hi, Eric Antonison, Minnesota DNR, and I have nothing prepared, so be prepared for that. This process, thank you, Bill, for that. That was a great introduction. It's been going on for several years. We actually started talking a couple years before that about recreation and recreational passage along the river. The Otter Tail River is about 187 miles long, starts up in Becker County, and happens to come through Fergus Falls. It's, according to some of my colleagues sitting in the row behind me there, Luther Odlin and Neil, they say that, Neil Haugerud, they say that the Otter Tail River is one of the most biodiverse rivers and one of the most, in our opinion, most beautiful rivers in Minnesota. It goes right through our town. It happens to be a state water trail, one of 26 or so state water trails in the state. That was legislatively designated as a water trail. People do travel it, so we have been talking quite a bit about recreational passage along that. That's what started the discussion before FERC got involved. The FERC process, it's a long process, it's very involved. And I just want you to know that they do take a look at hydropower. They're looking at hydropower and what Otter Tail Power wants to do. But they're also looking at the impacts of that project or those projects on natural resources, and they're looking at the impacts on recreation. These 5 projects that they're looking at relicensing do impact about 30 to 38 miles of the river, depending on how you count it out. That's a big stretch of river, and that does impact fish passage along that whole stretch of river. It impacts recreational use, both fishing, paddling, floating, for those of you that like to tube. I mean, all of those kinds of things are certainly impacted. In 1991, that was 30 years ago, that the last license was negotiated. Actually, the first license, I believe, right, was negotiated. The DNR sat down with FERC and with Otter Tail Power and others and worked out some different agreements. And Bill was right. A lot of the agreements had to do with recreation. The public access on Highway 1 or County Road 1 and on Highway 210 onto the river were both negotiated as a part of that process. But there were some other things that were negotiated as well, and one of them was from Diversion Dam down through the Hoot Lake plant. Water is diverted out of the river into Hoot Lake, Wright Lake, and used at the Hoot Lake plant for a couple different things. Well, there's a 13-mile segment of the river that about half of the average yearly flow of water is diverted out of there. So that does impact recreation in that section, and also fish, invertebrates, you name it, whatever critters like to use it, whatever plants need it. And so the DNR did negotiate some different flow agreements with that. So at certain times of the year, certain base flows were required. Those are the things that I do remember, Luther, or were there others that?
Well, a couple of fish passage projects that came out of that process that we did cooperate with Otter Tail Power.
Yeah.
One was at the steam plant dam, also made that now so you can paddle through it. It's not a dangerous dam anymore. We also put a fishway through the diversion fishway. That was at state cost, which was kind of unique for a fishway to be done at state cost through a privately owned dam.
So fast forward, here we are looking at this license process. This license will be for the next, we just found out on April 29th, at least I did, the average license is for 40 years. All along we had been told 30 to 50 years. We were told on April 29th it's a 40-year license, could be up to 50 years. If for some reason Otter Tail wanted to reduce it, they could reduce it down to the 30-year term. This is a long time, and so this is a time for us to think about the natural resources and the recreation that are impacted by all these facilities. Think about what this river could be through this section. The DNR has been talking quite a bit about fish passage. At a minimum, I think we'd like to see fish passage around all the dams or all the hydro facilities. There's already one around diversion dam, so I do want to be clear that at least as far as we're concerned, we don't see any changes to Hoot or Wright Lake because there's already fish passage around the diversion dam, which impacts those two lakes. But there is no fish passage around Dayton Hollow Dam, Pisgah Dam, Central Dam, or Freiburg Dam. And that's a big thing for the fish communities, for the mussels, for, again, for all the little critters and plants that live in the river. And it does impact recreation. There's still some places where we feel that the recreation facilities at the dams, but also through town on the river, whether they're at the dams or not, could be improved. We believe that some flows could still be improved. There's currently no minimum flow around the Freiburg Dam. There's a small section of river that it's leakage that supplies that part of river. We believe that this flow should be increased a little bit more through that 13-mile segment of the river going past Broken Down Dam, which is a city park, as you know. So those are kind of some of the basics from the DNR side. And you know, we've been supplying comments. We've been encouraging others to supply comments, whatever those comments may be. And I would encourage the city to supply comments, even if it's just saying, hey, this is a river that flows through our town, helps define our town, and is important to us. And the next 40 years is also important to us. And we want to be abreast of that. We want to be a part of that decision making. So, yeah, go ahead.
You just had a comment on the.
Thanks, Eric.
Just to comment on the fish passage issue, since it was brought up. Barriers on rivers can have a watershed effect, and we've shown that around the state. So not only for fish, but mussels and species like lake sturgeon, walleyes. Virtually all our species migrate. And I've had I'm old enough to have been through the last licensure, so and other licensures around the state. But I've also assisted hydro companies around the country on providing fish passage. And providing fish passage for these hydro facilities in much of the country is fairly routine. It's a standard requirement on many of these projects. So it's just kind of considered a cost of doing business. So I've assisted on projects all over the East Coast and upstate New York. And those fish passage projects have had a substantial benefit to the watershed. So just wanted to throw that out. This isn't something that's unique.
Thank you, Luther. Any questions or comments? If not, we'll, Sean?
Yep. And most of you, I'm Sean Donay, and I work with basically the recreational side through Parks and Trails and the DNR. And it's a little bit on the process. So when we first started getting out of this, there's different discussions. One of the things about the process is, sorry to counteract the word, but there's no derailing the process. The process is designed in an intent to bring all the stakeholders, bring the city and everybody together to bring out information. That's the purpose of all the studies, everything else, the public input, the comments from everybody else, is to bring out information. And I mean, that's a fact of a part. An opinion of mine is more of, FERC is kind of just sits back there and looks at the information coming in. If the information doesn't come into them, they don't have basis to help guide decisions. They don't have basis to provide balance to anything that's kind of provided for it. So part of this process early on is we had gotten somebody from the National Park Service, Randy Thorson, to come in, and we met with the city and talked about that very same thing. So if you as a city do not provide any comments, and you can do that at any time throughout the entire process, simply submit a letter to FERC. It goes on their online e-library, and it's part of that online document that they can refer to. It's actually, I've been told, it's not enough for even me to speak at a public meeting. Everything I bring at a public meeting, it's great, they hear it, maybe it sends a little bit of a vibe or how the study went, but if we don't submit it in writing through this process, and again, we can do it anytime, that's what they use to it. So really would encourage you to be part of the process because it hasn't happened. I think part of what has happened because of that, you know, the early recreation study included a need to do survey work on all the recreational within each of the dam areas. Your Riverwalk wasn't even in that study because it never got brought up as part of the process. It was added in the addendum of the second one, but then just basically mentioning that it's there. So if you look at that piece of information that is missing for FERC to look at and say, you know, what is this piece of it? There's no mention of your downtown riverfront plans through the everything too. Sorry, I get a lot of energy in me sometimes, so it's not nervousness, it's just like, it wants to get out. So if I'm shaking, don't call 911 or anything like that. So part of that, I mean, you have the Riverwalk going through there. A big part of that Riverwalk is going to be ADA accessibility. One of the specific studies that came back out of the first one, because it wasn't done at the first study, is looking at ADA accessibility of all the current facilities, but also identifying the future. So that's part of the study too. It's not all about the past, it's the future piece of it and looking at the studies. And again, this is more of a personal opinion, FERC can decide, but that study was very poorly done. It doesn't include things, it includes misinformation that's in that study. And if it wasn't for people coming through in that process and saying, you know what, we feel you're really missing the point here when you say that Central Dam is accessible, when you say that Pisgah Dam is accessible, and it's clearly not. There's no parking, there's several concrete stepways, there's several concrete walkways through there. So that's part of this study, is bringing that information out, helping Otter Tail Power, helping FERC and everybody. Because, you know, like anything else, when you do a study, you do a process, you get individuals, there's a short amount of time, they can't capture 100 years of use. They can't capture the next 40 years of use. They need all of us to do part of that piece. So when I think of downtown, I think some big issues as far as if I was the city, what I'd be thinking about. One of the things they talk about is fishing. And one of the ways they measure that is they look at erosion that's happening around the dams. Not so much from the erosion standpoint, because that's bad, but it's an indicator of where people are trying to get down to the water. The pathways through there. There's an erosion spot below Central Dam where people are trying to get down there to fish. So yes, maybe the final product doesn't become, you know, FERC says that Otter Tail Power should do this, but maybe it is, hey, you're doing a river walk down there. Maybe we can have some help in creating a spot that you can get down the river and fish. Maybe a little piece of that helps with signage along the riverfront for the portage. Maybe it helps with a put impacts piece. So your involvement in that process helps identify these things. It's not a derailing. It's not a, you know, it's not like there's file drawers and they're just dropping things in. It's a gathering of information so we have a really good plan for the next 40 years. And I think it's in the city's best interest to kind of do that and engage. And I'd welcome any help we can do that. I've enjoyed being at your riverfront meetings. I hope that DNR can work with you in the future to provide as much access to the river. It's a public resource, and in the end, part of that balance is the next 40 years of use of that public resource. How does that balance out? What's Otter Tail Power's responsibility? What's FERC's responsibility? What's the public responsibility? And how do all three of those things come together? If you don't engage in the process, you end up getting, basically, you're telling FERC that everything good is status quo. And status quo, I think, isn't good as you look at the changing recreation that's happening in the river. If you look at the changes that you want to make in Fergus Falls, those aren't the way it was 20 years ago. Those aren't the way it was 100 years ago. So what do you want to see in 40 years? Because that's part of what this licensing is. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Item number 3, we'll move along to item number 3. Is capital improvement process overview, and I'll call on our city engineer, Brian Uvarro. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the community. As staff, we figured it would be a good time just to give you a background in regards to our capital improvement plan. Enclosed in the packet is a public notice. We also have the schedule also for the 2020-24 capital improvement plan. And we also have the 2019 through 2023 capital improvement plan for your viewing as we discuss this. So the annual CIP process, we refer to it, is primarily the conduit in which planning visions are captured and memorialized within an official city document. This is completed on an annual basis. Nothing contained within the CIP is considered permanent. It's rather fluid in nature. In general, the city's CIP is composed of a list of improvement projects categorized accordingly to the respective departments and facilities that city staff and other interested parties have put together for considerations. Projects we'd like to see completed. These projects can be advanced or delayed with respect to the corresponding construction year that's noted in the capital improvement plan based on need, primarily based on availability of funding. This is a public vision document that allows city staff to get input from projects from the public, other boards, committees, in addition to the city council input. Ultimately, the city council has to approve all specific projects by initiation to begin the process. That's when we assign the public improvement number. If initiated, requests for fundings and allocations and expenditures will be refined as the process moves forward for those specific projects. Once again, I do receive the capital improvements for this next year. I'll input it into our program. It'll go through the planning commission and the process set forth in the schedule here, and it'll ultimately come down to council for adoption at that time. So just wanted to give you a background of what we're doing with this process. Any questions?
Thank you, Brian. Any questions of the council on the process? Thank you. We'll move on to our final item on the agenda, which is a DNR water supply plan. And again, Brian Uvarro.
Yes, thank you. Before you is in regards to the City of Fergus Falls Water Supply Plan's 2019 update. This on May 7th, the DNR approved the City of Fergus Falls Water Supply Plan. It's formerly known as a Water Emergency Plan. This is needed for all communities serving more than 1,000 people, large private water suppliers in designated groundwater management areas, and suppliers within the Twin Cities and Metropolitan. So it is a statewide effort that's required by us to do. I have included our approved plan with by the DNR and also the corresponding letter notifying this approval with it. So to complete this process is what now the City Council is required to pass a resolution, thereby adopting this water supply plan to complete this process. So at this time, I'm requesting a resolution adopting the Fergus Falls Water Supply Plan pursuant to state statute.
Thank you, Brian. And we would need a motion to bring that to the council for
I would make that motion. I got a question.
So, motion and a second. Caroline, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Anthony.
Just out of interest, obviously it says it's to 2018. Does that get, so on the local water supply plan, it says it's 2016 to 2018.
Yeah, the template, that was on a template and everything like that, so.
Will that get updated to 2019?
I believe so.
Right, okay, thanks.
Any other questions, Brian? Motion is to bring this water plan for approval to the council on Monday evening. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. There are no other items on the agenda. Andrew, any announcements? If not,
Your Honor, I would just say, members, immediately after the meeting here, the plan is to have a photo of the council members that's been requested by Pedal Fergus Falls related to their bikes. I don't know how many of you biked to the meeting this morning, but nonetheless, I think he still wants to grab you to get a picture outside, so don't run off too fast.
that word,
Well, just as a question, maybe you could fill me in. The bid opening for the RTC project was last week, and the company that was the low bidder, is there any information in where the process is moving with them? Is it the low bidder where they apparently have met the qualifications? We expect to see that presented to us now on Monday. Can you give us any information on that?
Brian? Call on our city engineer to answer that question.
Yes, bid opening was last Wednesday, the 8th, for the RTC Phase 2 demolition project, public improvement 9506. We had a total of 9 bids. The award recommendation has been prepared. It is going to be on the next council meeting for the 20th here for that recommendation. But in regards, I believe your question is to the low bidder, apparent bidder at the time. Yes, that company, once the bids are taken, they are validated, and it was deemed, of the 9 bids received, 3 of the bids had bid irregularities, we refer to them as, and they're deemed non-responsive. There's a variety of things in the bidding documents that are requirements, we call instruction to bidders. That's fully disclosed to all the bidders. And in particular one of the 3 happened to be the lowest apparent bidder, and they're essentially deemed non-responsive. And our recommendation and everything at this time, like I said, we're still preparing it. It'll be at the Monday council meeting. But the second low bidder, Carlton Companies, submitted the second low bid. Their price is still within reason and everything, so at this time, we will be recommending to proceed with Carlton Companies at that time.
And all that information will be in our packet for us to.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Monday evening.
Yes, I just do.
Yeah, Your Honor, members, just to add to that, you know, if these bidders are reaching out to you, trying to lobby you in terms of awarding a bid to them or trying to persuade you in a direction, I would encourage you not to engage in that conversation. The bids have been opened, the rules were clear, and the staff and the consultant have reviewed that, and we'll be bringing a recommendation back. But I think it is inappropriate for bidders to be lobbying city council members and engaging in discussions outside of public meetings related to awarding those bids. So
I know Stantec has also been communicating directly with those bidders.
Directly with those bidders and everything, and the key thing is this is a fair, competitive bidding market.
Everyone's under the same rules.
Everyone is under the same rules, so.
Just to clarify where the question came from then, is there's been conversations and people have asked me, now I haven't been approached by anybody trying to lobby, there hasn't been any of that going on. I haven't tried to contact any of these companies.
And just to clarify, some of us have, so just, that's where that comes from, so.
Good. Where it comes from on the people that have asked me about where this might be going is a question regarding any potential salvage of important.
Certainly.
What's thought to be important things, stained glass windows in the chapel or any kind of historical things that might be available. And should they try to contact the contractor ahead of the bid opening to say, can we work with you? How would we do it? What would the process be to try and address some of those questions? So that's where it was coming from for me.
To answer that, Your Honor, Mr. Kwame, similar to the Phase 1 project, we haven't entered into an agreement yet. I would recommend that if any interested parties, once that's announced and we enter into a contract, essentially when we are entering into a contract, when it comes to demolition project, we're assigning over salvage rights to that contractor. Being a public entity and everything, we typically, if public property, we have to declare surplus. We just don't have the ability to negotiate a deal with an independent party. The contractor, however, is because of salvage rights. That being said, we would encourage, and typically when I get those calls, I just refer them to the project superintendent. However, it's not identified. We haven't had a pre-con or anything like that. But I would wait till we have the pre-con so we have the person that any party needs to talk to, the right person. So we can give that out and everything. That's typically how we approach it.
Very good.
Thank you, Brian. With that, we're adjourned. I think we get to some of the